I think that may have resolved the audio issue. If someone can let me know, that would be great. Let me just check to make sure that we now have audio back on. Yes, all good. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse. I'm going to touch base on some of these things. You've seen some of these slides already. I'll touch base on them really quickly. And then what I will do is I will actually have this re-recorded to start from the beginning. And that way there'll be a copy of it that you can actually watch if you need to go through it again. But we'll start from going through basically. I'm not going to go through again who we are, who I am, or an intro. I might just go through the introduction side so that for those people that are actually on the session that did want to see and know and need to know more about how RTLS works or what it is, I'll go through that real quickly. So basically what RTLS is, it stands for real-time location systems, and it refers to a system that can actually accurately determine the location of a person or an item, an asset, within an internal facility. So we're not talking about external, we're not talking about GPS or anything like that. We're talking about inside a building, inside a location. Or it could be on the perimeter of a location, as an example. Some of the things we're going to talk about during the session is the RTLS technology, so the RF communication, and there's a whole bunch of different technologies that can be used for within the RTLS space. We have the RFID, Zigbee, LoRaWAN, ultra-wideband, Bluetooth, and I'll talk about those as we go through because it's important to understand exactly what technologies are available to see what would work within your organization, because there may or may not be one size fits all. Today you may be using a Wi-Fi solution for a particular application usage, but you're wanting to actually put a whole bunch of assets out there. Wi-Fi may or may not be the right fit. You might want to go with ultra wideband or BLE or Bluetooth low energy. We'll talk about what that looks like. But fundamentally, basically what it does is, as far as the communication is concerned, what it does is it provides a communication between the tag and the network that then gives you the location as to where you are or where that item is. Some of the examples that we'll go through will be mobile duress. So we're going to some of the examples that RTLS is used for are things like mobile duress. We're not going to touch on that a great deal today at all. We're really going to talk about the asset tracking because that's why we're here. We are going to talk about recall and preventive maintenance, asset utilization, and a few other use cases so you can see the value in that technology or in the technology. Some of the areas where we're going to focus on is really about productivity boosting and efficiency gains. So we're going to look at equipment locating. We're going to look at shrinkage. We're going to talk about recall management. So things like, as an example, if you've actually got an IV pump or a device that's actually been sent out and there is an issue with that device and you need to find it, you need to find that within days, not within weeks or months or years. We're going to talk about par level management. This is really important when it comes to patient safety. There's a lot of organizations, a lot of the facilities out there today, can't find equipment, and we'll show you how you can actually manage that using par level with RTLS. Maintenance is also very important when we talk about things like preventative maintenance when it comes to IV pumps. So IV pumps on a regular basis need to be updated. Being able to find those IV pumps can be troublesome. We've even had customers that actually want to be able to track and monitor where their mattresses are or their beds, because they want to be able to actually, the mattresses actually have a 5-year life cycle. And when they actually want to be able to find those mattresses, they're really difficult to find. So, the idea of putting a tag inside a mattress that allows you to track where that mattress is, adds a lot of value. Rental management, there is a significant reduction in annual operation expenses when it comes to being able to identify that you have enough equipment and you don't need to go and rent more. Within healthcare organizations, there's a lot of rental equipment that goes on. Part of putting an RTLS system for asset tracking allows you to actually reduce that. Fulfillment and staff satisfaction. This is one of the big things. If you're a nurse within a facility or a doctor or an orderly and you're trying to find equipment, you could spend hours, minutes, days looking for equipment. The idea of putting this technology in place is that it helps to actually give the staff satisfaction that they can go to a system, look it up, find it, and then go on and continue their job. And obviously CapEx and inventory, knowing what you're actually spending or knowing what you need to have is also going to assist you in actually reducing the amount of CapEx that you actually have to spend. So some of the assets, now these numbers that we've put here, these are rough numbers. Please don't tell me that a wheelchair is worth more or less, or an IV pump's worth more or less. This is just to give you a rough indication in relation to what we see in the market. And these are the sort of the devices or the assets that we need to consider when we are actually looking at putting an asset tracking solution in place. Some of the hospital departments that are served by RTLS today. So, as I mentioned, there are a lot of organisations on here at the moment I can see, and a lot of you guys are already using RTLS in one way, shape, or form. This really breaks down by, I guess, department and area within the facility on the value or the things that you can actually use RTLS for. This is a generic RTLS slide, okay? So, I'm not being specific, but it's generic. But it's good for you to see and understand some of the areas within a facility that RTLS can be used for. So we're not just talking about putting an RTLS system in place for one particular use case. It's potential that it would go across or roll across a multitude of use cases. And some of the issues, the main issues that we're going to talk about is really loss and theft assets, misplaced assets, asset condition. Is it in a good or bad condition? If it needs to be repaired, how do we get it back? How do we notify how do we notify our team that device needs to go back? Asset availability. So how often or where are those assets available? Maintenance cycles we spoke about before, looking at utilization and capitalization on your assets. Hoarding is a big thing that we see on a regular basis within facilities. They want to be able to keep their equipment in their ward and don't want anybody else to have it. What we see that happens is that they end up hoarding them, and what that does is it doesn't allow anybody else access to that equipment, which means that there's a delay in care. And that creates frustration from the users when it comes to being able to actually find equipment. So we're going to touch on, as I mentioned before, here's some of the key points we're going to touch on. Waste of time. There is a massive amount of time that is wasted when it comes to searching for or trying to find assets. If we looked at just an average of around about 20 minutes per shift that it takes for a nurse to try and find an asset, then there's a massive cost involved with that. If you've got 60 staff or 100 staff or 300 staff, and you add 20 minutes per shift for each of those staff members, that ends up being a substantial amount of money. And what we're really talking about here is really situational awareness and resource efficiency. And part of what an RTLS system for asset tracking does is really gives you the actionable data when you actually need it. So it's being able to find the right equipment at the right time and pinpoint areas where you can actually increase the utilization of those assets potentially. And also making sure that you've actually got your most valuable resources, which are your people, are actually providing care and not actually tracking on trying to find assets. So when we talk about asset utilization and inventory management, this is really we're going to touch on 4 pieces here. We're going to touch on the problem. So obviously various departments across the hospital, they need to find critical assets. Some of the units may have more than they should or more than their allocated amount. And you may have a major issue that is required for that equipment's required, but it's not there because you can't find it. So the example would be in a cancer center, they have more heart rate monitors than they actually have in the cardiac center, which is crazy. They shouldn't have that. So the solution for that when you're using an RTLS system for asset tracking is being able to capture where the equipment is, understand the location of it, determine how often it's being used. And this will allow you to actually balance the asset or the asset across the department, the facility, and potentially the whole hospital. And the way in which you do that with an RTLS system is you put a rule in place that says, let's measure the amount of time that asset is within a certain area, how often that asset is being utilized, how often it's actually moving. And then what you would do is you would then report the total time that it's in the patient areas and determine whether you can reallocate that asset to other areas within the hospital that may actually have the requirement to use it on a more regular basis, as an example. The need for asset tracking in relation to theft and asset management. So I pulled this off the Healthcare Dive website, and according to statistics, um, between 10 to 20% of a typical hospital mobile assets is either lost or stolen during the useful life of that device or of that asset. Now, if you look at that it's an average of about $3,000 per item. That's a substantial amount of loss or substantial amount of financial loss if you're not actually able to find those assets. More importantly, what this leads to is it leads to a diminishing patient care, because you're not actually able to provide the care that you need at the time you need it. You're spending time going and trying to find those assets. I also found this on the European Council, the Council for the European Union. This is a very, very recent, this is on the 21st of February. They talked about, the council has endorsed new measures to help prevent shortages within hospitals. And it's a recommendation that they've endorsed. And they're basically flagging potential shortages. And what they're basically saying is the best way to prevent shortages of key medical devices is to catch them early. In other words, if you see that you're running low, or you need more ventilators, or you need more cardiac machines, or you need more IV pumps within a certain area, and you don't have them, you want to be able to actually catch that early and fill that shortfall. And you want to be able to do that in an automated fashion. Obviously, someone's going to need to take the asset there, but the reality of it is, you need to know that asset needs to be there before it needs to be there, if that makes sense. And we do that in a simple way by basically putting in a par level management system. So the problem that we have is the minimum requirement of equipment is not available in the department at the time that it's required. And the example might be number of ventilators required in ED. It might be wheelchairs in admission or discharge or whatever it may be. Unfortunately, historically, for those of you who I know, and there are a number on the call, my wife has been through some health challenges over the years, and there's been many a time where we've actually been stuck or we've been trying to be discharged, but they're not able to find a wheelchair for her. And that's very frustrating. It's also frustrating for the staff that are there, because they want to be able to move you out and move somebody in. So being able to actually know where wheelchairs are at any given time is really important. So the solution for that is to actually look at having a rule that has a minimum maximum. So, how many devices or how many assets are within this specific zone or department. And when they go below that, when it goes below that number, set an alert and set an alert that will notify somebody that they need more assets in that particular location. So a rule in an RTLS system would be design or define the area, define the asset group, and then allocate that asset group to those rules, and then invoke a pop-up message, a page message, an email, whatever it may be, to go and fulfill that par level requirement. And you can also have and you can get set up defined reports that shows you historically, what those par levels look like within your organization. So I want to talk a little bit about the return on investment, not just about putting asset tracking in place, but also obviously there's a requirement to have infrastructure deployed to deploy RTLS. That's a given. That's something that just has to happen. But what we want to make sure is that we're able to actually gain additional return on investment from that investment that we're actually making. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other areas, and I'm going to talk through these very, very quickly. I'm not going to go through them individually, but we can do things like, and we mentioned in a few slides earlier, around recall management. So being able to actually identify and locate and pull affected clinical inventory that may need to be recalled. Preventative maintenance. I spoke a little bit briefly about that before, and being able to actually identify and bring back equipment that actually does need to be updated and does need to be firmware updated or whatever it may be. So it's about that preventative maintenance piece. Equipment sterilization is another one that, to ensure that your critical asset or your clinical assets are actually, are sterilized, and are ready to be used at the time when they're actually needed is pretty important as well. And this is something, again, that you can actually utilize this technology for over and above just the standard asset tracking that we're sort of talking about today. And then trouble ticketing. So trouble ticketing. So non-working equipment tends to be basically put aside, left in the hallways. And I've had that experience myself. I had an IV pump that was being used on my wife. It broke, it stopped working. They actually pushed it out. They got a new one. They pushed it out into the corridor, and it was there for 3 days until somebody came and got it. So not really a good efficiency utilization of that device or that asset. We're going to talk about what's the right technology and what's right for your facility. And I'm going to just pause really quickly and just sort of say, again, if you've got questions, now's a good time to ask. Well, any time's a good time to ask, but, feel free to ask them as we're going through. So the right technology, what's right for your facility? Well, it's going to be determined, and it's going to be different for a lot of organizations. And I guess one of the big considerations, and I implore you to consider this is IoT something that's of a consideration? Because if it is, then the RTLS system that you're looking to put in or you're thinking about putting in needs to be considered at the same time. And the reason I say that is that from a global standpoint, healthcare has got a very, very large uptake in relation to IoT. And is IoT a consideration for your organization? And if it's not, it definitely should be. These figures are based around APAC. They are in US dollars though. But you can see that in 2020, the market was worth about $7.2 billion. By 2025, it's going to be 188 billion. So, there is a lot of investment going into IoT, into the healthcare space. So I encourage you, as you're looking at an RTLS system, make sure that whatever system you're looking to deploy actually does, integrate and can integrate into an IoT environment as well. So I'm going to run through some technology. RFID, most of us would know RFID. It uses radio waves to identify and track objects. It consists of two main components. You've got the RFID tag, and then you actually have the reader or the antenna that will read that tag. For those that are new to the RTLS space, I hope this is going to be helpful. For those that already know it, bear with me, but I want to run through it to make sure that everybody's aware of it. Zigbee is designed for low power. It's typically used in home automation and also within sensor networks. It's not something that we see, and not something that I've even really seen deployed in Australia at this point. It has been out for a long time. Not something that we typically see in a healthcare environment. LoRaWAN, on the other hand, is designed for long-range communications, and it is a low-power consumption. We are seeing a lot of organizations or a lot of facilities looking at LoRaWAN from an IoT perspective. It does send small amounts of data over a long distance. I actually have LoRa running within my home. I've got it for temperature monitoring. I have it for pool. I have it for a few other different sensors that I use. But again, it doesn't necessarily add additional value in relation to the RTLS side. But we are starting to see LoRaWAN, coming into the RTLS world and integrating into the IoT space. So I wanted to put that in here as well. Ultra wideband has been around for a while. It uses very large bandwidth to transmit data. It is relatively accurate. From what we've seen, it does operate within narrow frequency bands. And what it does is it basically spreads the signal across a broad spectrum. So it typically spans across gigahertz. So it is a relatively older technology, but still new in the realm of RTLS. We are seeing the likes of Apple and I believe Samsung are now slowly starting to build UWB technology into their phones. And the use case for that, from what I understand and what I've learned, has been more around indoor. It's not indoor navigation, but navigation scenarios. So not necessarily in a real-time location space, but in a navigation sort of environment. Bluetooth. So a lot of us know Bluetooth. Some of us are even talking and using Bluetooth as we sit here on this session. Basically, it's a wireless technology. It basically stands for short range communication. It's a short range communication between devices. On my desk, I have 4 or 5 different Bluetooth devices. I've got my wireless keyboard, my wireless mouse, and the like. So that's really what Bluetooth is typically been designed for. Then we go into Bluetooth low energy. Now, there is a difference, and I'm going to talk about the difference between Bluetooth and Bluetooth low energy, because I think it's really important to define what it really is. BLE, or Bluetooth low energy, is really optimized for low power consumption. So it does transmit small amounts of data intermittently, and it's great for devices in an RTLS world, in an IoT sensor world. And what it's been designed for is to basically provide a longer battery life. I know myself, as an example, with my keyboard, I'm going back and forth with this at the moment. I need to recharge that probably every week. With a BLE tag, as an example, a Bluetooth low energy tag potentially will give you anywhere from 12 months to 5 years to 10 years to 15 years worth of battery life. So really important when you're looking at it. When you're thinking about BLE or Bluetooth and BLE, although it does have the similar wording, there are 2 different technologies. There's also a difference between BLE and BLE 5.1. So BLE was the original version, or BLE was the original platform, or the original version of BLE, and then BLE 5.1 has come out. And what that does is that introduces angle of arrival and angle of departure. And what that is providing you with a lot better accuracy, and also an increased range and a high data throughput. So I mentioned before, when we're talking about BLE, we are talking about 2 different versions of BLE, and there's additional versions that are coming out. So I'd suggest, to watch this space. We'll certainly update, and we'll have another session as the new versions of BLE come out to sort of update you in relation to what the additional value is out of the additional versions as well. Wi-Fi, well, we all know Wi-Fi. You're probably using it now. I'm using it. Traditionally, Wi-Fi from an RTLS perspective has actually been used. It's been used for mobile duress in healthcare, and for those from New South Wales Health, you'd be using. That you're using Wi-Fi for your mobile duress today. I'm going to touch on some things to look at and some things to think about when you are looking at identifying a new or an RTLS provider. So technology and capabilities, compatibilities is really around assessing what the RTLS provider is going to be able to provide you with, and what use cases you're looking at using that technology for. And you want to ensure that the technology is going to be complementary to your existing system, or alternatively, if you're looking at putting in a new system, that it's going to be compatible for your specific needs as you move forward. And that's whether it be equipment, personnel, temperature, hand hygiene, whatever it may be. So really try and identify, when you're looking at an RTLS provider, looking at, what the technology is and the compatibility. Accuracy and reliability. Now, this is a big one. I get asked on a regular basis, is Wi-Fi the right thing? Is Zigbee the right thing? What's the right thing for me to use? It's really going to be determined based on what your outcome is. But what you want to make sure is that you have your outcomes so that you can look at what does the accuracy of the system and what does it need to be to fit your requirement. So look for a provider that provides you with the level of the level of accuracy that you need. If you only need to know that it's on the floor, look for a vendor that can do that. If you need to know that it needs to be in this room and on this shelf and in this vicinity within like a 10 centimeter or a sub-meter range, look for a vendor that has that functionality. Scalability and flexibility, really important to make sure that the vendor can actually scale to your requirements as you grow and as you change, and that the solution is adaptable depending upon the area that you're in. So if you're in a hospital, but you're only really wanting to actually monitor, or you're only really wanting to track assets within a certain area within the facility, make sure that, yes, that technology can provide you with that functionality, but can it scale up? So, being able to scale up from small areas to large areas is key. And certainly from a cost perspective, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. The integration capability. So, integrating into other systems like EHR security systems, operational management systems, really important to make sure that it can be integrated seamlessly. We have seen in the past where there is additional, where a customer wants to integrate an RTLS system into a third-party platform. There can be significant costs involved in that. The cost can obviously be monetized over the value in how many tags or how many devices you're looking to track. But certainly make sure that it has the ability to integrate. The user experience. Look at the interface. Look at the user interface. Make sure that your users, when you're going into it or when you're deploying the technology, are going to actually be able to use the system. We've seen many a system that's been deployed where they actually don't have the ability. It is a programmable system, but it's not pretty as far as the interface is concerned. So really important that the user face is actually intuitive and it's actually easy to use. And also make sure that they have the ability to give your staff or your teams the training and support your teams that they can actually use the system on a day-to-day basis. Now, we know that in a hospital environment, staff change, they churn. So it's important that it is a system that's relatively simple, that can be either trained by another staff member or that they actually have, that the provider has the ability to actually go and train on a regular basis for your organization. As far as support and maintenance is concerned, look at what the support that the provider provides. From our perspective, look at the vendor, look at the partner that you're working with. Does the partner have the ability to provide you with the support that you need as you're actually using the system? Things like updates and maintenance services and making sure that there is a long-term success criteria for your RTLS implementation. That's really important. So identifying the vendor and identifying the right partner to work with that vendor and ensuring that partner is certified to be able to actually support that product. Some of the other key things: compliance and standards. Ensure that it complies with industry standards. Ensure that as they develop, that they actually comply and that they comply with the industry standards, for your specific sector. As far as the cost is concerned, it's really important to consider all costs, and it's said there, but it's really important. Where you may have a facility that may have a bunch of Wi-Fi that's deployed, it may very well be that, hey, Wi-Fi is the right solution or Wi-Fi RTLS system's the right solution because you already have some Wi-Fi. In an RTLS environment, to actually use a Wi-Fi RTLS system, the system or the Wi-Fi needs to be an RTLS grade system. And what that means is that you need probably about 30% more access points than what you would if you were just running on a data system or a data network or data Wi-Fi network. So, and then when you're talking about other technologies, BLE 5.1, ultra wideband, there's a cost involved in actually that upfront cost in putting that technology in. So that you've got to consider as a given. When you're looking at it, you've also got to then look at it and say, well, okay, let's say, for instance, I want to put in, say, 300 asset tags. What's that cost? What does that cost look like if I've got to put infrastructure in and I've got to put the tags in? What's also the cost of the software? So what is the software cost? Is it an upfront cost? Is it a subscription cost? Really, when you're talking about and you're looking at these technologies, it's not just the initial setup. I mean, if you've already got Wi-Fi and you've already got RTLS grade Wi-Fi, great. It might seem like it's cost effective or cheap to deploy. When you look at the ongoing costs and you're looking at the different tag types that you might want to deploy, from a relatively cost-effective BLE tag to an ultra-wideband tag to an RFID tag that potentially is cents in the dollar. Really look at the overall cost and not just what it is as a once-off or as an initial setup cost. You've really got to look at everything that's involved with it, and I implore you to do that, and certainly challenge your provider to give you a cost justification or an ROI, not over a 12-month period, over a 3-year period, and over a 5-year period. And I would also say that as you invest in this technology, you're not investing in this technology for today, you're investing in this technology that's going to grow with you for the next 5-10 years. And that's what you need to look at, is what does that 10-year or what does that 5-year cost look like? Also research the provider, make sure that they have a good reputation in the market, whether it be, and some of these providers are going to be new, like you will hear us, from our organization, we'll talk about vendors that you may never have heard before. If we're talking on a one-on-one basis or we're working with your partner. And the reason that is it because part of me going to these events across the world is to look for the latest and greatest technology and be able to bring it back and be able to show you and talk to you and give you the understanding in relation to what are these technologies and what's the value. Make sure that and when I say look at the reputation in the market, if the vendor isn't in the market yet, look at what the reputation is across the globe. What are their customers like? Talk to them, ask them for case studies, get them, asked to speak to an existing client. If you're talking to a vendor and they can't provide you, a provider, and they can't provide you with an existing customer, whether it be here locally in Australia, New Zealand, or in an APAC, for those that are on the call from the Asia Pacific region, get reference cases or have that user experience out of another state, another country, because the technology may be new. The fact that it's new in Australia or the fact that it's new in Malaysia or in Singapore doesn't necessarily mean that it's brand new to the market. It's obviously been around for a while. So don't, consider that, when you're looking and reviewing your vendor of choice. Also make sure that they are stable and reliable and also innovative. One of the things that we've seen, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years is vendors that come out, but they're not innovating. Making sure that they're actually updating their offering with the latest technology and the latest advancements and complying with other vendors within the market. And that's really going to ensure that, you have this system in place, as I mentioned before. We're looking at a system for not a year purpose, but a 5-year and a 10-year purpose. That'll make sure that you've actually got, that long-term strategy. And really evaluating these factors will allow you to actually, find a provider that meets your current needs and supports your goals as you move forward. And it's really about maximizing the benefit, the ROI, the return on investment of this RTLS technology, but also improving the efficiencies, improving the security, and also the data analytics that you can get out of this technology is really valuable when you're able to take that back into the business and show them the valuable insights that they can get, out of using a system like an RTLS system for asset tracking. That's sort of come to the end of my presentation, for want of a better term. As I mentioned before, happy to answer some questions. Feel free to put some questions in the questions tab. I've got a few at the moment, but I'll feel free to add some more, and I'll go through and I'll answer the ones that I actually have right now. So the first one is, can I make a recommendation in relation to the most cost-effective solution to deploy? Look, it's really going to depend on your outcome, and that's what we get asked on a regular basis is, is cheap always the best? Not necessarily. You can put in an RFID system for one doorway where you want to know whether items are going in and out. That might be a really cost-effective or cheap solution. Perfect. If that's what you're looking for, brilliant, then go ahead with that. It's really going to be about what your outcome is. What are you looking to try to achieve? To determine what's the right solution. So it's never based, yes, it's based on price because it has to be something that's cost effective. But the reality is at the end of the day, you want a solution that's going to be able to deliver your outcome as opposed to just fit within your budget, if that makes sense. Another one is, how long does it take to deploy an RTLS system? Again, it's going to depend on what how big the facility is. I mean, if we're talking about, Tweed Hospital, the new Tweed Hospital, it's going to be, probably 3 months to deploy it. It's going to depend on what your requirement is, how large the area is, what is the outcome you're looking for. I hope that helped. And again, happy to have some conversations off, out of this session to sort of touch on those sort of things. Things that we would need to look at is, the floor plan. So, how big is the facility? What are the outcomes you're looking for? All those sort of bits and pieces. But look, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. It's a really good question, and I'm keen to have that conversation with you further. Is there any technology coming out that that I don't know about, that you don't know about, that I can advise. Yes, there is. There's a bunch of technology that's coming out. That's one of the reasons that I am actually going over to the event next week in Barcelona. There is some new technology coming out that you'll see us come back, and you'll see me come back, and we're working with a couple of companies to bring back this technology into the market. Excuse me. We see this as being a big game changer in the RTLS space within this market. We'll certainly give you an update as that progresses as well. Can you use multiple RTLS technologies in a single environment? Yes. So the question is, can you use multiple different RTLS technologies in a single environment? 100%. So we have customers that are using BLE, but also want to use Wi-Fi. They can use ultra wideband. The key piece is actually going to be the system that you're actually using to tie it all together. So that's going to be the determining factor. The technology itself, there's the front-end platforms that are out there today. We use a number of them that will actually integrate multiple technologies into the one platform. So that's really important, is to, if you are looking at an RTLS system and you are looking at bringing in multiple platforms and multiple different technologies, you may have a system deployed right now for asset tracking and you want to actually add temperature monitoring, or you might have a system today that's designed for temperature monitoring, or sorry, for mobile duress, but you want to add asset tracking to it, but you want to use different technologies for it. It's not the technology itself, it's the integration platform or the platform that will actually help you in being able to integrate those platforms or those technologies together. And we've seen it, we're doing it today. So again, happy to have a conversation offline regarding that. Any other questions? Hang on, someone is typing. Cost. Look, cost. The question is, which is the most cost-effective tag? What is the most cost-effective technology based on the tag? So it depends. I mean, as I said before, RFID is really cheap. You can get RFID tags for 20 cents. But again, you've got to put a lot of infrastructure in place. There are a lot of different types of technologies, BLE, ultra wideband, as I mentioned before. They all have different price points. And again, when you're looking at the cost of deploying technology, you've got to look at all those things. So don't just look at is it going to cost me $100,000 to deploy infrastructure? Is it $100,000 for the infrastructure and it's $150 or $300 for a tag, as opposed to it's $200,000 for the infrastructure, but my tag price is $50 or $50 per tag. So, don't just look at, like I said before, don't just look at what the infrastructure cost or the tag cost is. You've got to actually integrate it together. Another question is, can you see this working in aged care? Aged care is one of the big customers in the healthcare space. Absolutely. This is something that we are talking to and deploying on a week-to-week basis. Very, very important in the aged care space. And again, depending upon the requirements of the aged care facility, it can be it can be used for multiple different use cases. The classic example is actually care minute reporting. So the federal government's brought out a requirement to do reporting on how often a caregiver is with a resident. RTLS is really the only technology, the only way they can actually accurately report that. And it's when two people come together, or the nurse and the caregiver or the resident comes together, they start tracking, and they're able to actually track that time. So again, that's a great question, and certainly can be used in the aged care space, and is being used today for that particular purpose. That looks like all the questions. There are a couple that I will thank you for the questions. There's two that I will actually answer offline because it's more about what we do. And I don't want to get into that. I can answer those offline. But listen, thank you very much. Really appreciate everybody's time. I know your time is valuable. It doesn't go unnoticed that you're here. So again, thank you very much. If there's anything else that you need from us, feel free to get in contact with us. If you've got your phone out, that's me. You can scan it. We're here to help, anything you need. But again, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the day, and safe tracking.